Yeah, g'day everyone, and welcome to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey. I've got the Panthers are well and truly back. Roosters hit another low, but of course the big talking point this week has to be the West Tigers recording their biggest, scoring the most points in their club's history. We've got all that and more. We're going to talk a little bit of Origin. Before we get to that, let me welcome in my co-host, Winnie. How are you going, mate?
I'm okay, thanks, mate. Probably a bit grumpy, maybe like yourself after the results today. Perfect round spoiled. Won both best bets on Friday, Saturday. Won the mixed matchup. It was even paid out in advance of the game today because of the 66 scored by the West Tigers. Manly was not going to be catching that, and thanks to Toppy for paying it out early. Manly did still score, what, in the end, 40 though? So just as well that West put enough on the board. And my other best bet, the Bulldogs, and I went first half, and they won the game as a slight underdog, which means once they lost the first half, hey, I can cop that. I didn't really want them to win the game. I know you didn't either. So we'll get to that and how that all unfolded. It cost us two best bets today. So it means we went 2-2 on best bets for the round, plus a mixed matchup win and a bloody close to the best same gamer of the round as well. $11 going down because Parramatta won 13 plus. We can also cover that when we talk about Friday night's action. After a week in round 11, for every favourite one, I believe in round 12, 5 underdogs got up.
And you know what? I did put out my Clarkie's pick the round, and I got to admit, I've probably done, I want to say close to 20 in my life where I've tried to pick the whole round. Probably only done it 3 or 4 times, but I was feeling confident, more confident than I should have been heading into this round because in the end, it was a disastrous multi that never really got off the ground. Before we jump into all the games and recap all of that action, Origin is literally right around the corner. We've got the shortened round, and of course, next week will be Origin. We don't have the official teams, guys. They will be announced tomorrow. From the best of my knowledge, Billy Slater said in the morning, and I think the Blues were angling towards the afternoon. So what you've got on screen there, thanks very much, Winnie, is my Queensland Maroons squad prior to this round. So obviously this round, I couldn't, get that graphic prepared in time. We come here live straight after, but this is where I went before. I think the best place to probably start, Winnie, is with you. With that 1-17, now we've seen round 12, your immediate changes you'd make?
So I think Ponga will be in. I think he did enough in round 11 in the Knights' emphatic win over your Titans. Then he had a scare off for an HIA, but he returned to the field, even though the Knights were disappointing against Cronulla. So I have to believe Walsh might have thought he had that jersey for 15 minutes, but that'll be Ponga. Look, the wing's interesting. Hammer, I don't mind him on the wing. Or do you go Murray Taulagi? I think Dane Gagai, although he's had some sketchy performances, he's done so much in the jersey that he retains the centre spot. Most of the other positions speak for themselves. I mean, you've got Felice there, though, and he's going to be suspended. Yeah. So that's a major talking point, right? You had him in your starting. But I think the thing about Kaufusi, as awesome as he's been for the Dolphins, I didn't feel like he was a slam dunk selection. I feel like Queensland has that much depth in the forwards that it would have been touch and go for Billy. A little bit like Josh Papali'i taking his hat out of the ring this week. I feel like that just saved a headache for Slater without costing Queensland because there's enough depth there. So I'm going to put David Fifita in that start. Oh, sorry, you've got Fifita. I'm going to bring Capewell into that spot for Kaufusi. And your bench, I mean, Horsburgh, the Raiders obviously got their pants pulled down this afternoon. I didn't have Jai Arrow in there. I'm trying to think. You guys can let us know who you've had, who you guys have had differently. I had Lindsay Collins in my team, but the Roosters form may deny him. Well, I bring Welsh in now because Papali'i's out, so I could fit Collins and Welsh in my team. You've got Ruben Cotter. Jai Arrow covers kind of edge and as well as middle. But what changes would you make? I'll bring that one back up on screen. Or have you heard any rumours? And I'll remind myself what other change I might have gone.
Yeah, I haven't heard any rumours for the Maroons yet. In around the league today, where I post up most of the news, there was a lot of rumours for the Blues squad. I think looking at that now, yeah, I agree. Kalen Ponga does have to be the number one. And I think that both sides might do this where they pick out of loyalty in game 1 and then adjust as game 2 rolls around. I remember a few years ago, Freddie picked Tarek Sims, who was terribly out of form for the Blues, but had a great series the year before in Origin. And after game 1, he was out and probably the end of his Origin career. Scrolling through, I mean, the certainties of the halves there, Cobbo, I wouldn't say he is any certainty just because
Pretty,
Taulani is the option as well, but
pretty sure Cobbo gets there. Yep.
I think he's most likely. Christian Welch seems to be one that a lot of people don't have in their side. And I mean, I get it. There's Collins, Hopgood, Fotuaika, Tino, Cotter, Horsburgh, Arrow. There is so much middle depth there for the Maroons. But I just think someone like Christian Welch, who's won premierships, played in big games, won with the Maroons before, his experience in the middle will be very important. I've gone with Ben Hunt, Harry
I
Grant.
agree with that. I mean, he's the current captain of the Melbourne Storm.
Yeah.
That's got to count for something, just his experience and leadership. And he was an important stalwart of the Queensland team before their Achilles injury that kind of ruled him out of rep for a couple of seasons. It's not as if he lost his spot due to ever letting the team down or lack of form.
And spot on. And I think his form isn't quite at his best post Achilles tear. It's such a serious injury, but on the basis of loyalty and experience alone, you've got to have him. I'm going to keep the hooker combination they went with last year. Loved it. It just worked so well. We know Felice Carfusi is, let's say, 99% unavailable. I'd be shocked if he beats that charge. There's clear contact with the head, and it's his third of that specific charge. So I just bring Kurt Capewell straight in there. Think he slots in seamlessly. And then no changes to my bench. Really, the only thing people weren't happy with was Jai Arrow. But I just love the element that he can play back row, play in the middle. I think he's even played a little bit of hooker back in the day. Well, obviously not preferable getting to that stage. But yeah, main changes there. Bring KP in, swap in Capewell. I'm happy with the rest there, Winnie.
Let's bring up the New South Wales side in a second. But if you guys have got your thoughts, please share them. We'll put them up in the comments. I also had Tom Gilbert in mind. So my changes to yours would be obviously Carfusi's out. We both agree, right? So Capewell's in the second row for both of us. And then in my bench, I actually have Tommy Gilbert and Lindsay Collins taking Horsburgh and Arrow's spots. But then you're asking a lot of your second rowers, because arguably everyone else in my team that I would pick would play middle. And I do think, although Capewell hasn't had the strongest year, his ability to play centre at a pinch covers any of your back line, because as I've said before, you get any backline injury or HIA, a winger has to go off, or you slide Capewell to centre, and then Valentine Holmes plays wing or fullback. So I think that's kind of Queensland's contingency. Let us know your thoughts, guys, as I bring up Clarkie's Blues team, and Clarkie, you can talk us through it and what you would change, because this graphic is good as of prior to round 12.
Yeah, so prior to the round, I've got some big changes looking at. If anyone's wondering why players are highlighted there, I highlight my changes each week. Just going down, look, I almost feel like after Tom Trbojevic just had 4 try involvements, you've got to slot him back at centre. All I wanted to see was that he still has the confidence to fully extend and get involved in the game of footy. And he showed me that. So I'm prepared to bring him straight back in there. Unfortunately, that does mean Stephen Crichton would miss out. And I would swap those wingers around where I'd have Brian Toto move to the right wing, which he can play, and I'd keep Campbell Graham outside of his club teammate Latrell Mitchell. The rumours are that
let me stop you there. That's a big one. Like, Turbo has just played the house down. It cost our best bet. One of the reasons I played the Raiders was I was really questioning what gear Turbo can get into, and wouldn't you know it, he plays his best game. Is it almost too late? You have to feel Freddie knew his team before the game kicked off the Savo, or has Turbo done enough? If you watched it, you probably want him in there as a New South Wales fan. But I'd like to know what you guys reckon. Would you pick him or not? And if so, does he really displace Campbell Graham in the right centre? And then do you move Campbell Graham to a wing? We know Graham will be there one way or another. I reckon they actually should still leave Turbo out, do the right thing by Manly. He's finally gotten one solid game under his belt, but you're still a risk going into Origin. I mean, literally seen his brother go off with a hamstring this time in Ben. So that's a massive flashpoint, and that's going to be very polarizing. And again, the team's going to get picked, New South Wales later tonight. So fascinated to see, or tomorrow. So fascinated to see which way Freddie goes for that one, because Turbo definitely made a big statement this afternoon.
I think a big statement's an understatement, really. I mean, 4 try involvements was absolutely insane. And I did read in News Corp newspapers today that at this stage, Stephen Crichton and Campbell Graham are not locked in. One of them is likely to win the wing spot in contention with Josh Adokar. And if Turbo played well, the report said he would come into centres. I've got Nico Hines as my 6, and I went with Api Coruscant as my 14, though News Corp papers actually also said Jerome Luai will be the 6, And Sydney Morning Herald reported Nicho Hynes would be the 14. They're only going to run with one hooker, which they're reporting is Damien Cook. I'm tempted to go Api Coruscant. I'm really tempted, man. He was unbelievable. 3 try assists. His craft around the ruck, I think that offers a little bit more. Cookie, I probably favor a little bit more defensively. Who would you go out of the Nines out of interest?
Yeah, I would go Coruscant. I mean, the Tigers have won 3 of the last 4. And if you're picking Luai and Cleary, then, and obviously you got Yo, don't you want kind of 6, 7, 9, and 13 to all be Penrith connection? Because obviously Coruscant, that's where he's played the last 4 or 5 years of his career. So especially when you couple with that South Sydney lost by 20 points on Friday night as favourites, and West Tigers scored 66. So I thought they're going to go the way of Coruscant and trust him for 80 minutes. Cook was dropped from rep footy last year. But, you know, we can only speculate based on the rumours. As a Queenslander, I fear Cook less because I think his running style and his speed is not perfectly suited to Origin, where there's less space and less time. I actually would fear kind of the craft and the inroads that Coruscant could create, bringing that New South Wales forward pack onto the ball. What about the forward pack?
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I mean, keep the spine, or 3/4 of the spine that went to 3 premierships in a row, right? And we know Teddy plays somewhat similar to Edwards. Well, what I would have definitely keep Jake Trbojevic in there now. He's gotten through the game. Payne Haas picks himself. What we're hearing is Liam Martin and Tyson Frizzell are both in. Hudson Young will be 18th man. So what that tells me is Cameron Murray is going to come off the bench. He's not playing back row. I think the back rows are going to be Liam Martin and Tyson Frizzell. I think Isaiah Yeo will stay there at lock. 14 would be Hynes. Junior Barlow off the bench, of course. And then that leaves Cameron Murray on the bench and one more spot, which the Knights were reportedly informed, and this was via News Corp newspapers, that Frizzell will be in the side and Daniel Saifidi be on standby. We think you'll be in the side, but not locked in 100%. So, yeah, that's sort of the way I build out that forward pack, or basically what we're hearing anyway, based on the rumours. Any changes that jump out to you immediately?
Well, again, Manly impressive today. So Hamole needed that good performance, but I don't think he's a slam dunk to necessarily start. You could start Liam Martin right second row, right edge, and you could start Cam Murray on the left edge second row, and that's a way to have him on the field as well as Yo. And then Frizzell could come on, and you could even slide Murray to the middle. I've spoken about playing Murray in similar to a Ruben Cotter role, which basically allows you to have 2 locks on the field, and he's kind of playing prop, essentially a loose forward in the middle of the field just for his play the balls and still for his ball playing ability. So yeah, Frizzell out from the Wilderness back into the New South Wales team. We've called him out his performances. So that's a big effort. I still probably would have picked Hudson Young ahead of Frizzell, but I wonder if Freddie sees more versatility in Frizzell and that he could play middle or edge. I feel like Hudson Young could have anyway. So that's how I see it. Again, be interested to know what you guys reckon. We should all know in in about 20 hours time.
Yeah, just to close that out, Frizzell was technically never dropped. He was actually in the Blues squad right up until getting injured last year. So it could be a sense of loyalty like we saw Freddie do with Sims that series a few years ago. And as a Queenslander, I have to admit, I'm obviously confident in State of Origin. You never tip against your side. It's just that different level of rivalry. But I'm just thinking, Api Coruscant, if he's there, off the back of a Cameron Murray, quick play the ball with Isaiah Yeo facilitating, Jerome Loyer, Nathan Cleary early to Latrell Mitchell or Tom Trbojevic out wide. It's scary. It's really scary to think about. But yeah, I think the Blues squad is probably not as strong as it has been in previous years, I must say, partly on the back of injuries and players' form, but still a mammoth side. And I just can't wait for Origin this year. It's going to be an absolute belter, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's that time of year. The fever's out there. I mean, we didn't even know the teams yet. We spent a good 10 minutes just talking about what we think they might be. We appreciate your opinions as well, guys. And we're going to do an Origin preview too. And I guess we're targeting probably Tuesday, around the 30th of May. It could be 24 hours before kickoff. So not this week. We'll let round 13 play out, which is an abbreviated round. And then we'll be jumping into an Origin preview early next week with maybe some special markets. But now that we've done a bit of Origin chat, because I feel like that's forefront of everyone's mind, that's what you're going to be talking about with your workmates tomorrow, I feel. Let's kind of zoom through round 12, because we had our highs and lows. But, yeah, I don't think anyone in the comments will be telling us they picked a perfect round this week.
Oh, if you picked a perfect round, I want to know your lotto numbers, because that's a very, very, very good round, might I say. Yeah, so let's start on Thursday night. It was the Panthers and the Broncos at Suncorp. Panthers got up 15-4. My MVP in this one was Pat Carrigan. And I know Cleary was unbelievable, Winnie. It's one of those extremely rare times where I went someone from the losing squad. I do it maybe once a year. But the NRL record is 78 tackles in a game. I think that was Elijah Taylor, or maybe it was Michael Luck, and it included extra time. Carrigan had 68 tackles. He only missed one, which was in the final 3 minutes, because he played the full 80 minutes. Now, I think anytime you play the full 80 in the middle in NRL, it's commendable. But when you do it against the Penrith Panthers, who have been to 3 premierships in a row, with a forward pack that has Liam Martin, Fisher Harris, Leota, and just Isaiah Yeo, one of the most powerful packs in the comp, it is beyond commendable. It's an amazing effort by Patrick Carrigan. So I had to give him my MVP award. Maybe that's my Queensland bias. I tipped Panthers here, so I was happy with the result, but I probably did expect the Broncos to keep it a little closer. That being said, it is only an 11-point margin, so I don't look at this as, oh, the Broncos have had a few losses now. They've really fallen off. I just think there's a little bit of work to do around the edges for them. They had opportunity. Certainly they had opportunity. The Panthers did miss 41 tackles, but their scramble defense was something else. My God, there would have been about, let me say 5 times where I was watching the game with my partner and I said, oh, the Broncos are in here. And somehow, some way, the Panthers would find a way to shut it down. And that's what the back-to-back reigning premiers do, right? But yeah, to sum it up, I thought Broncos would be closer, but I'm not disappointed in their effort at all. And I'm not looking at them in any sort of negative light. I still think they're a great footy side. Winnie, how do you see this one?
So to respond to some comments, every comment I can see about the Blues team, everyone agrees with us. They'd go Coruscant over Cook. And maybe that's still the case. Like, not every rumor that gets through the grapevine ends up being correct. Kumat said, I've seen a couple of comments, please recap the best bets record. So the best bets, we never want to hide anything. It's in the description of every video. Recap, preview the latest bets record. So it is 21-16. Recently, I mean, how recent do you want? We lost them both today. Do you have to rub it in, mate? But we've won, I think, 9 of the last 12. We had won 9 of 10 going into today. So, again, when people tell me, oh, the ones I've got, none have lost, I always say only back the ones you agree with. At least then you can have a little bit of responsibility and a little bit of ownership of your results as well. And as for the game, mate, you would have said several times, oh, Broncos are in here, because they thought they were in a couple of times in the second half. So the line for this game was 7.5. And I said on Wednesday, I kind of leaned to Penrith. I definitely expected Penrith to win, but I felt the line had gotten a bit high on me to kind of get great value out of it, because it had started a lot lower. And then after the first half, I mean, what was the score at halftime? Was it? I'm trying to remember when Penrith kicked the field goal. But it was something like 10-0, and it looked like Penrith, I thought, would win comfortably, because my reason for liking them in the game was just a lack of experience in the Broncos' spine. And
I've got 8-0 at halftime.
Yeah, 8-0, and no Reynolds being the main reason there. But to Brisbane's credit, they did not go away. They kept in the fight and would have got a lot closer if not for some controversial decisions by the bunker. I'm interested in what you guys thought. We got a new precedent set where Atkins seemed to basically overrule Klein or talk him into changing his decision in real time when the try decision for Brisbane was being reviewed in the bunker. I'm talking about the one where the kick goes up, Reece Walsh jumps, bumps into Peachy, and then Staggs takes the catch, and I think Staggs comes down and grounds it. And they ultimately said it was interference by Walsh. And I can see both sides of the argument. One is he's such an athlete that he jumped without looking, hung in the air, and then looked back for the ball. And funnily enough, if Staggs didn't catch it, I think Walsh would have caught it. And can you ever say a player who catches the ball on the full wasn't contesting the ball? However, on the other hand, to me, it looked like a bit of an AFL play, where they kind of jump into the other person and then use them as a springboard. It looked to me like Walsh jumped, and almost bounced off Peachy and then turned. Yeah, it was like a specky and bounced back. And do we think that's allowed? Because if we allow that as a way to contest the ball, every attacking player will jump and try and bump into the fullback and then turn at the last second. I think I'm comfortable with that being called kind of obstructing the catch. But I'm just saying how close it was. If you give that a try, I'm not going to be mad either. And then it could have been a lot tighter. And the other one, it was a Flegler rule to have lost the ball, I believe, where it has kind of hit the face of the Penrith defender and dislodged. And a lot of people don't like that because they're saying he didn't lose it. For me, I actually do think you've got to put responsibility of ball security on ball carriers. And I think if you're holding the ball and it hits the defender and dislodges, even if unless they were stripping at it, I think that's a knock on. So I actually feel like the bunker got both calls right, but I know people were a bit disappointed, and it kind of decided who covered the game.
And it's one of those calls where it comes from the bunker. If you use common sense, you're damned. If you go by the rule book, you're damned, because it's so close that no matter what you say, fans of either side are just going to disagree. The only thing I disagreed in that whole process was the referee actually overruling the bunker, which I've just never seen before. The referee said the bunker cleared it or something like that, and then the referee said, no, that doesn't look quite right.
He said there's no interference, which means now we're going to check grounding. And then just when they're about to check grounding, Atkins, you could hear him say, it doesn't look right to me, Ash, the contest. Yeah. Then he looked at the contest again and says, Walsh has no eyes for the ball, which is funny because he was basically overruling himself, but very clear that he'd gotten that word from Atkins, and it made him change his mind because the put down ended up being fine. So it decided whether it was a try or not.
Yeah, and that's entrenching in rugby territory. I don't know if people here like rugby union. I know it's very territorial, but in games, referees will actually stop and watch the big screen themselves with the TMO, and the results
talk it out.
Take a long time to get to. We don't want that, guys. We don't want that at all. I guess last thing for this game I forgot to touch on was, no Adam Reynolds. So that's a really great effort by the Broncos to, go down by 11 points, less than 2 converted tries against the back-to-back reigning premiers. Great game there. Friday night opened with the Dragons and the Roosters. The Roosters win this 22-18 because I actually missed the last tackle of this game. I'm joking, of course. The Dragons win it. Yeah, and I saw your comment on my Facebook saying, I know you had the other post ready to go. Show it to me, and I did. But yeah, I guess the Dragons get this one done on the full-time siren, 24-22. My MVP was Ben Hunt, and my notes at first, he did say no surprise because we know the player he is. But I think back to my recap show, I actually said I don't think Ben Hunt will have his best game because he's so close to Anthony Griffin, and it's kind of a slap in the face. You saved your best form after I got sacked, mate. But this finish in this game is why we love rugby league. Moments like this are just magical. And whether you go for the Dragons, it's even better. But if you're just a general fan, it's a level of excitement where Ben Hunt gets the ball on last tackle. He's going down the short side, and you're just sitting there thinking, oh my God, are they going to do this? And when they do, it's great watch. Really tough for the Roosters, though. Like, they were literally one tackle away from getting, maybe you could say, their season back on track. But I actually won't go that far. I think even if they won this game, I still wouldn't look at them in any different light because they still played the same way they've played the last 2 or 3 weeks now, where it's scrappy, there's too many errors, there's not enough direction, and ultimately they got what they deserved after an extremely poor first half where they completed at something like 60%. It's not good enough. Now, I love Teddy for a try in this one. If you guys remember the preview show, that was one of my big things I was really keen on. And really, I thought he put the Roosters on his back and said, we're going to win this game in the second half. And he did everything he could. 2 tries, try assist, close to 200 meters, I believe. His second half was absolutely superb. But the cherry on top for this, just the Dragons, a great way to see a club that's gone through such a tough week where players are fronting the media, being asked, why is he being sacked? When the board could have handled this a lot better and made the decision months ago. So it was a nice way to see the Dragons, cap off a pretty tough week with a W. How do you see this one?
Oh, yeah, this was fantastic. This is why we love the sport of rugby league. The note that I had and the comment I was literally about to type into the forum was, boy, the Dragons find ways to lose games. I thought it was the exact same story yet again. Throw out last week where I said they were god awful. You're going 5 straight losses where you lost by single digits. And in fact, 3 of them, I think, Dragons literally lost by 2 points. And then one game they lost by 1 point, which was the Roosters on Anzac Day, and the other by 6 points when they scored the same number of tries in Canberra. So all these narrow defeats. And I thought it was going to happen again, as you said, 22-18 should have been the final score. But there's this ridiculous try, and you said you saw them go blindside, and you thought, is this going to happen? I mean, I wasn't even thinking that. There was no room. Hunt goes blindside, then puts a bomb up. They bat it back. It's got to go through several hands. Another kick, which could have gone anywhere by Sloan. Absolutely. And he just gets it over the head of Junior Barlow and Jackson Barlow, I should say. And Fianga, I think, picks it up. Bouncing ball wasn't easy for just an unbelievable victory for the Dragons. Well deserved. And the thing is, we've said for the last few weeks, how many more excuses are you going to make for the Roosters? Now, Brandon Smith only played about 20 minutes in this game, had a fractured thumb. Although I was curious that he didn't even come on till, I think, just before the end of the first half. So not sure, was he carrying something else into the game? Regardless, if you're a Roosters fan, you're going to say, well, we didn't really get much out of Smith, like he's injured, and we're super unlucky with the finish. But I really believe the Dragons deserve to win this because the try that put the Roosters in front with about 3 or 4 minutes to go was pretty lucky as well. I mean, how often do you see a fullback catch a bomb and then get one-on-one stripped like half a second later for the winning try? Because that's what Teddy did. He ran through and snatched the ball out of Sloan's hands and just planted it down for what was seemingly the match-winning try. So that would have been a brutal way for the Dragons to lose this, who did lead 14-0 and had a much stronger completion rate and just looked like they were going to win comfortably, and the Roosters just looked all at sea. However, in the second half, you talked about Teddy, and he was immense, but I also thought it was Luke Keary. There are many players in the comp that play a short side better than him. He scored at least 1, if not 2 as well. Scored 2 and just short side raids that got the Roosters back in the game. And then the Dragons got the speed wobbles. The Roosters hit the front, but then the Dragons get back in front. You think they've done enough to win it. As I say, this was back and forth. But some of the reasons why I think the Dragons also deserved it, I really thought Radley probably had to go for 10 for a headbutt. They somehow missed it despite the fact it was reviewed by the bunker again. And yet a day later, he's charged with the headbutt, right? So we all saw it, except for the people reviewing it at the time. Pretty big call. In fact, players could be sent off for that. And I'm kind of glad Radley wasn't sent off because the Dragons won it anyway, but he should have got 10 minutes for that. And also thought another pretty deplorable, I hate to always talk about officiating. It's been really topical, hasn't it? But what about where Lomax is trying to rip the ball off Corey Allen and body slams him? And they called it a head slam, and Allen's head never hit the ground. All he did was picked him up, Lomax, and dropped him on his back. Completely fair, hard tackle. It's starting to get to the point where you can't even tackle hard anymore, or you're going to risk that they're going to say it was unnecessary or rough. And that ended up being, instead of being a dropped ball by the Roosters, ended up being a penalty to the Roosters. So I really thought those calls were a bit rough. And I did think ultimately the Dragons were just going to blow this one. So I'm glad that they got the miracle finished. They do deserve it. And somehow I feel like that wouldn't have happened under Hook. I think that there's a new lease on life with this team, and there's still a long way to go this year. So, don't write them off because we've seen them be very competitive for a lot of games, and maybe with some confidence on the back of that win, they can keep it going.
Yeah, and the Supercoach lurker, I was going to touch on this as well. James Fisher-Harris got penalised for making a hard tackle too. I thought that was silly. Teams that play the week after their coach has been sacked have a 35% win record. So the Dragons were immediately against the odds there. It's the first time they have beaten the Roosters outside of Anzac Day since the 2010 Grand Final. So they broke 2 really hard stats there. This was almost the Anzac Day game in reverse, where the Roosters were starting to come back, but it doesn't get any easier for them. Brandon Smith will undergo surgery on that broken thumb. That'll be 8 weeks on the sideline, and Victor Radley has been charged with striking, so even an early guilty plea sees him miss 3 weeks. Yeah, Roosters are in a world of hurt at the moment. Now, this was our better same-game multi, the Friday night blockbuster, and the NRL has been really good with scheduling this year, I will say. The Thursday and Friday night games, the late ones, have been exceptional. The Rabbitohs versus Eels. Eels win 36-16. My MVP, I went with Mitch Moses, but you can go Dylan Brown. I was just really impressed with the 4 try assists there from Moses. But I just didn't see this coming. I'll be absolutely honest. I think you could tip Eels and come up with reasons for it, and I would have listened. But you can't tell me that 14th versus 2nd as they came into the game and seconds on a 6-game win streak is going to lose by 20 points. I just can't buy that at all. But it does sum up the nature of the NRL this year, where any side can beat anyone on any given day. And that's just the theme of this season. It's been awesome. In hindsight, I am looking back at this one now and going, maybe there was reasons to tip the Eels, which you did as a best bet. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I took the Eels at the first half line. So I saw value in Parramatta. Definitely can't say I saw that kind of scoreline coming.
Yeah, so that's a great best bet there. But I think to their games, the Storm in round 1, Panthers, which they won, and there was another game, I think it was the Broncos, where they lost by 8. But they were all big teams, and the Eels really shown up for those games. And that's the theme of this game here. They've shown up against a big team. Where it went wrong for the Eels last year, they didn't show up against the little teams. They lost to the Tigers. They lost to the Bulldogs. Please don't remind me of that. If you know, you know. But they lost a few games they should have won. Indigenous round always brings out the best of Indigenous athletes. I love including them anytime try scoring options. And the Rabbitohs do have the most Indigenous players in the league. So I probably did expect more out of them. The difference here, though, Winnie, and I know all the backs deserve all the credit. It's a great scoreline. Sorry. It was the middles for the Eels. We've got JP, 200 plus meters. Wiramu Greg, 200 plus meters. Hopgood, 39 tackles. Meanwhile, Hame Selly and Cameron Murray were the only 2 South forwards to creep over 100 meters. 135 was Selly, 105 for Murray. On the back of that, as I always say, if the Rabbitohs forwards don't win, Latrell doesn't get involved, and the Souths just can't get over the top of their teams. Great win by the Eels, and I'm sure you would have loved it as well with the best bet.
Loved the best bet. I mean, we took the first half line. They ended up leading at halftime. But what hurt me in this game was the same game multi because I had my longest shot of the season. So I had Eels to cover the first half line. They did. I went Bailey Simonson for a try. And the funny thing is, I always see you put up the post, and we've won 3 so far this year. Now, I've only actually had about 9 or 10 same game multis on better. There's been a couple of weeks where we didn't even have one. So unreal strike rate, you know what the odds we're getting, right? We've been that close on a few others. But it's funny because when I see you post it every week, it's always just people panning it. There's always people saying that what a garbage tip donation every single week. It doesn't matter how many we win, even if we're winning 1 in 3 or whatever. And this one was no different. And all the comments were, because the other leg was either team 1 to 12. And all the comments were, Souths are going to blow them away. Souths 13 plus. No chance Simonson scores. So you get the Simonson try in the first half. You cover the first half line. In fact, the Eels are leading, which is kind of perfect for either team 1 to 12. Simonson scores again second half, just to be sure. Souths actually hit the front, and you have to start worrying a little bit. And I was worried about Parramatta because we had no Sean Lane going to this game, which was a weakness at left back row. Andrew Davey was injured very early on and off. I can't remember the injury, Clarkie. Was it head knock or otherwise? Then Ryan Madison comes on and he gets injured before halftime with a calf injury. Now you're down to 4th string. You don't have any other edge forwards on the bench. So you're basically playing a middle forward out there left. Was it Makatoa? I can't remember who actually played left second row. But I thought that Parramatta would get pulled apart because Campbell Graham did score the try, I think, that put Souths in front basically straight through that hole on the field there for Para. So if anything, I'm worried, can Para hang in this? But it was an important game for them. I said on Wednesday they had to find wins where people weren't expecting them. Not only did they hang in it, they score the next 24 unanswered points. And, I mean, as far as our bet's concerned, where we needed either team 1 to 12, obviously we lose. I do feel like game of inches, if Dylan Brown doesn't get to that grubber by, was it Lockie Ilias or Cody Walker, the grubber in behind that he grounds. Sorry, no, I'm mixing my teams up. Around. Mitchell Moses. Yeah. Mitchell Moses, one of his 4 try assists. His grubber's in behind. Latrell is letting it, thinking it's going long. Walker grounds it a centimetre from the dead ball line. you don't get that try, which actually pushed the margin beyond 12, maybe you don't get the next one because obviously then it becomes a 7-tackle set, and we'll never know. But that's how close it kind of was. Even when Souths were down late, you thought Souths could still come up with a try, and they've got the talent. When you talk about the Indigenous skill sets in this team, Latrell, Walker, Johnston, they did connect a couple of times. You thought that Souths could still get a backdoor try. We'll win our 11-1. It would have been the multi that no one thought was going to get up. In fact, Parramatta scores again and slams the door on us there. And as you say, Souths were first on the ladder going into round 12, and Para, what did you say, 14th?
Yeah,
and 14th wins by 20. So I am not as shocked at this result as others because I said on Wednesday the reasons why Parramatta could be in the game, but I didn't see this scoreline coming. It just goes to show, almost anything can happen sometimes. It's not an easy competition to predict. But as you said with Parramatta, like they've beaten Souths, they've beaten Penrith, and they went to Golden Point with the Storm. So we know that they're just as capable as the other top heavyweights in the competition. Now they've got to find the consistency.
They do have to find the consistency. And I think there's a real blueprint they can take from this. Hand up, I got it wrong in the preview show for sure. I said I think they'll miss Regan Campbell-Gillard this week and the Bunnies would run over them. Completely not the case at all. Instead, they all stepped up, and that needs to be the Eels' blueprint moving forward. Let's win the middle and allow Brown to run and Moses to kick. Moses has broken the record for the most kick meters so far this year, and Dylan Brown has run 200 meters in back-to-back games this year. Halves don't usually do that. That's their blueprint. To tie it all together, the people in the comments section, I mean, there was one person who said, South 13 plus, this isn't a chance. And I said, you know what? I agree with you. If I was building this multi, I would go South 13 plus, Johnston anytime, and unders. That would have been my bet. I would have lost all 3 legs, and it would not have been paying $11. So I said to him, that's what I think too. But trust the man with the 9-year winning record. And I mean, ultimately, it's another same game multi we lose by 1 leg, which has happened a few times this year, but still in profit. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. Saturday opened up with the Sharks and the Knights at Coffs Harbour. The Sharkies won this one 26-6. My MVP was Will Kennedy. Another brilliant game. 10 tackle breaks, close to 200 meters, try assist. A really underrated performer who stood up in Indigenous round. You love to see it. Now, I thought Sharks would win here. I got my tip right, but I thought the Knights would be much closer. Much, much closer than this. If I'm looking at this final score now and it was 26-20 and Sharks won, that's how I might have seen this one going into it. Really, the Knights didn't offer too much at all. And I think Sharks blew 5+ chances in the first half. That scoreline is generous to the Knights. It could look a lot worse. Lockie Miller. Now, I never single players out. I'm not going to do that here, but I think he has lost that touch that he had earlier in the year where it was kind of like, wow, how can you move KP back to fullback? Miller's playing so good. He's had 3 relatively quiet weeks in a row by his standards, isn't getting the same touches, isn't getting the same meters. And so I really wonder, how long do the Knights persist with their current spine? I think it's only a matter of time before, and this could be post-Origin, if Ponga gets selected at fullback. We see Ponga 1, Gamble at 6. I don't think he's highly effective off the bench. It's not quite suited to his game. And then Lachlan Miller to that 14 role because he can play centre wing and fullback. But ultimately, my takeaway from this one, Winnie, Sharkies were just in cruise control. They never had to try too hard, and the Knights didn't really offer too much resistance. Did you see it in a similar way?
Yes, and I have whinged on this show like last week. Every game that I was that close to a best bet, I didn't play it. They all won. Well, on Wednesday, I said I was pretty close to playing Knights plus 8.5. I really thought they represented the value in this one, and I stayed off it. So I have to also say if I got a lean wrong, and I don't mind getting a few leans wrong. It actually annoys me when they all end up winning because I should have just had more best bet winners there. So I was kind of glad to not be right in this one. And I kind of look at this game, and as we said on Wednesday, the Knights have been very close in the majority and nearly every game this year, held a second half lead in all but one of their matches this season before this one. So there was definitely reason to believe they could make a great game of this one again, but they were off the pace, and you start to think like they really miss Jaden Brayley. Like Phoenix Crossland is a makeshift 9. I take your point there as well about whether Gamble should be in the halves there, and then obviously Ponga would play fullback, because I did say a few weeks ago that Miller almost gets too involved. Like you don't see other fullbacks take as many hit-ups like tough hit-ups as he does, and he's the smallest bloke on the field. So is he starting to wear down, to your point? But Cronulla was impressive in this one. If anything, as you said, they could have been more clinical and even put more points on. But after last week getting a lead and allowing the opponent back into it, this time Cronulla really didn't let up. Seth asked about what we reckon whether Turbo's performance tonight warrants Origin selection. Seth, go to the little toggle on this video and scroll back to the beginning of the show, because we spent the first 10, 15 speculating on Origin and talking all about the performances. But we will recap that Manly game shortly. But in this one, if you didn't see it, the kind of scoreline is fairly indicative. A comfortable Sharks win.
Yeah, spot on. They make it 3 out of 3 at Coffs Harbour. Nothing else really to add to that game. It's how we mostly all saw it. But I will say, if anyone tipped the line in this next game, reach out. I'll send you $1 million if I ever win Lotto, because you just couldn't pick this. That you could pick a close Tigers win, and I'd buy it. And I know you did. I was on the other side, which is embarrassing. But yeah, the Tigers win 66-18. Unbelievable game. If you told me this scoreline, I wouldn't believe it. If you told me Stafford Toa gives Valentine Holmes an absolute bath, I would not believe that either, with Origin just around the corner. But Toa was absolutely unreal. You can't tip like this. You just could never tip this game and it be a sensible one with that line, of course. But yeah, so it's Luke Brooks' 200th NRL game. And on the back of it, they have offered him a new contract. He said his intent is to stay. An absolute memorable game for Luke Brooks. Look, I could say so many positives about the Tigers, and I'll get to that. But can I just play devil's advocate for 1 second? And please don't hate me, people. But for Luke Brooks, he's the only NRL player that's played 200 without finals game. And I completely get his inform at the moment, playing great footy. But I think for Luke Brooks' sake, not even the Tigers' sake, I'm saying like from Luke Brooks' sake, a fresh start would, I think, be much better for his career than staying where it just hasn't really worked out at the Tigers. He's not a bad player, and the Tigers aren't a bad club. For one reason or another, 200 games without finals is a bit too long for me. But yeah, that's, if I can say one negative. 66 points is the most points the Cowboys have ever conceded in their history. Brilliant work, Tigers. The Tigers' attack throughout this game was relentless. They could have stopped at about the 60th minute. Instead, they scored maybe 3 or 4 tries. So that is absolutely just unbelievable. No Western Suburbs Magpies and Balmain Tigers, that's both of their feeder clubs. None of them ever hit 66 either. So not only have the Cowboys conceded a record amount, the Tigers have scored a record amount. It was the night of records, but the most important part from this night, Winnie, Cowboys can't win the premiership. History tells us you cannot concede 50 and go on to win. No side's ever done it. Are you prepared to put a line through the Cowboys, given that stat and how they've played, or still too premature for you?
They're not going to win the premiership, and on the back of a performance like Saturday night, they're in dire straits to make the 8. And I was wrong a week ago when I said I was just not impressed by them whatsoever against the Dragons, and couldn't believe how much that game was there to be taking, and St. George refused to win it. And that's ultimately why I liked the Tigers this round, because I think the Cowboys might have had a misleading final score in round 11 and really aren't going that well. And the Tigers are better than people realise. They've been better than people realise all year. People have just jumped at criticising them. And look, we've given them their fair share, but not as much as like a NRL 360 that would half their show every night would be how bad the Tigers are. They were losing some narrow games. They weren't giving up. They were fighting back and winning a lot of second halves or keeping close. Then they beat the Premiers. Yeah, it is pouring rain. Premiers had a couple out. Come back up and beat the Dragons. Dragons are a basket case. I said last week I was quite impressed by the Tigers hanging tough against Souths, and they were not out of that game until 8 minutes to go. And then here, and I just want to say one thing, though, in complete respect to everybody that watches us and tunes in. Look, I had a best bet on the Tigers and took a 4.5 line, but I don't want to pretend like I saw this score coming. Just like I took the Eels at the start doesn't mean I thought they'd beat Souths by 20. I thought this was a 50-50 game. I thought the Tigers were getting a few too many points. So once you see it unfolding and you see the energy in the place and you see, that the Tigers definitely had the intentions to really put a performance in to be proud of for the Leichhardt faithful, because they'd hadn't won a game at Leichhardt this season. And, of course, the Brooks 200 game factor that you could see the players, it meant a lot to them. that the team was feeding off the energy, and you could see that momentum and that kind of snowballing. And it looked like a blowout could be on the cards. It felt like Cowboys couldn't make an effective tackle. Tigers were bouncing off them and getting so many offloads away and opening up space for the outside backs. And, off Ngowie's, you think he's scored and it would have been 24-0. It's called a knock on. Contentious by the bunker. Sheens hated it. You've won by 48 points and he still wanted to call the bunker up for that. But a minute later, Kyle Felt was scoring and it was a 12-point swing. And it went, instead of 24-0, it was like 18-6. And you're going, oh, this game's not quite over yet. But the Tigers got back in control and the floodgates opened in the second half. And that's the concerning aspect for the Cowboys. I mean, the Tigers are having a day out. They've never experienced anything like this. I can't think of, well, this is kind of a record-breaking score. But the Cowboys did kind of let go of the rope. They were just shell-shocked. And that's not the hallmark of a side that, is going to do anything this season. I know that they'll get some reinforcements back, like Taumalolo is a big one for sure. I wonder, we didn't really rule out any Cowboys in our Queensland teams. It's almost too late in the piece that Billy Slater would have probably already had his team in mind. I don't think anyone lost an Origin jersey. I mean, you say Val had a bad game, but he's definitely going to be there. So it might not have cost anyone. It's a concern for Queenslanders probably because you like to see your teams coming in form, which was more the case last year. I think all the Queensland sides were doing quite well when the Origin teams were picked. But it's worrying, like when a team gets blown out that badly and kind of appears to give up, that how North Queensland are going to build themselves up again after you thought that they'd salvaged their season a couple of times this year. But back to the Tigers, just really happy for them and that fan base. They've been long suffering, and then they've kind of been the joke of the league for one reason or another. The Anzac jersey, everything. They couldn't do anything right this year. And now there's real reasons to kind of be confident. And dare I say it, people who don't play, free agent players that are going to be coming onto the market next year or two, see games like that, see the atmosphere, and maybe don't write off West as a destination, knowing that like Benji Marshall was going to be taking the reins and a lot of young current players idolized him when they were coming through. There's actual reasons to have optimism. Whether they should overreact and sign Luke Brooks to another long-term deal, I feel like I've already seen that movie. So I'm kind of with you. Don't necessarily overreact and overpay again. But I'm happy for him getting that emphatic victory on Saturday night.
The Benji Marshall point is probably the best point you could make because all young Polynesian players love Benji Marshall. Everyone looked up to him in high school growing up, for me anyway. And I could definitely see a lot of people being interested in the Tigers for his influence there. I had a follower take in round 3 or 4 this year, and it was a very popular one that I disagreed with. Someone said the Tigers will not win a game this season. I said they'll win at least 5. And this was when they were at like their lowest of the low. And people genuinely laughed me out of the building and like said, that's a ridiculous take. How do you have a page? People were like so off me for that take. Well, they've already won 3 now. They're improving a lot. Leichhardt, they caught the 8th wonder of the world. Well, the Cowboys still only have 2 wins there in their entire club history. And Tigers snap a streak where they only had won 1 in their last 8. So that's awesome as well. And I just want to touch on Stafford Tower's stats as the final point here. 2 tries scored, 1 try assist, 5 line breaks, the most of any player so far this year, 12 tackle breaks, 223 meters gained. One of the best games I've ever seen from a center.
It was his 50th as well.
Oh, was it? Awesome. I didn't know that.
No, milestone. Well, because everything was made about the Brooks milestone. It was another milestone man who had a day out.
That is excellent.
As JD asked, who should the Raiders target next? Well, if the Tigers weren't signing Luke Brooks, is he an option for the Raiders who have to replace their 5'8"? Ben Hunt would be the other one. I don't know if he has any intentions of moving his family south. And obviously the Dragons got the feel-good victory that we discussed. But if he was to be released early, because Clarkey, there were those comments that resurfaced that Hunt doesn't want to be part of another rebuild, you look at him, Raiders. There's not too many other, I would say, stars coming onto the market for next year. We know they're going to lose Jack White.
I'll tell you what, I've got it up now, JD. It's a great question. These are some of the Raiders' options now, and this is why I think they should hold. Dane Laurie, Jack Cogger, Matt Foley's already there, sorry, Ben Hampton, Josh Reynolds, Jamin Salmon, Luke Brooks, Adam Clune, Kyle Flanagan, Sean Johnson, Drew Hutchinson, Blake Taff, Brandon Wakeham. I'm not jumping in any of those names to replace White, and maybe short term for a 2-year deal. And then when that marquee player does become available, Raiders need to throw all their eggs in that basket, in my opinion. Let's get to the Dolphins and the Storm at Suncorp Stadium. Storm won this one 24-16. I build this up as game of the round. It probably didn't pan out that way. My MVP was Elias Agatoa, and Craig Bellamy is slowly ironing out the rough around the edges and unlocking his potential. Unfortunately, he did not finish the game due to that reported AC shoulder joint injury, which will see him at this stage, quote unquote, an extended period on the sideline. But yeah, I'll start with accountability. I tipped Dolphins here for the upset, and I said, how long is it until we stop calling them upsets? Because this is a great side that can win this. It just wasn't to be. The Storm's insane record at Suncorp stands. Bennett has still not beaten Craig Bellamy at Suncorp Stadium since 2005. The great Wayne Bennett. There is a hoodoo at that stadium when it comes to Bellamy and the Storm. Unbelievable record. Dare I say a bit of a lackluster game? Maybe I only feel that way because of what was previous, and that was the Tigers and Cowboys with 80 points. But I felt this one was a little lackluster. My call of game of the round was absolutely wrong. My tip was wrong, so maybe I'm just a bit frustrated. But yeah, Storm did not score a point in the second half. And I say the phrase a lot on this show, putting the cue in the rack. That's the definition of it, guys, where the Storm just didn't really take the Dolphins as seriously as they should in that second half. And Dolphins had opportunities to win, but I think there are some good signs for your team here, Winnie. There are some great signs this year, regardless of this loss, where they've won in multiple different ways. They've got a roster that competes for 80 minutes. They don't put the cue in the rack like some other sides do. And they've got some real signings coming there next year. I think Flegler is one. Herbie Farnworth is another. And I just feel this squad is going to be a real threat moving into the future. Once these new signings arrive and this roster builds out a little bit more, I saw some real positives in this one for the Dolphins. Did you see it that way as well?
I just mentioned Ben Hunt. In all seriousness, if he asks for release, he is one of the highest paid players in the league. And I know your team would love him and you'd play him at 9. But whether he wants to do that, he could play 7 at the Dolphins. So come on, Benny. Look, the reason this game was a bit disappointing, I think, was we were looking forward to a great match. A lot of us thought there was a real upset potential. Storm do score first, but I believe it was 6-all, and it appeared to be game on. Then Felice Kaufusi gets sin-binned, and unfortunately from that point onwards, the Storm took the game away from the Dolphins because they extended that lead to 20. Sorry, it wasn't 6-all, it was 6-4. But the Storm extended that lead to 24-4 at halftime. Now, before that lead got that big, I think of the key moments, multiple botched tries kind of by Ewan Aitken. One where it's a 2-on-1. So pass the test, you score. He doesn't pass, he gets tackled. The next one, it's like a 3-on-1, and maybe the ball's a little behind him. He drops it.
It was a tough catch. You've got to make those catches.
Can't even remember if there was one other, and maybe it wasn't Aitken as well. But my point is, you can't waste those opportunities. And it wasn't long after those that the Storm was scoring down the other end. So you kind of feel like there was at least 6, not 12, left on the table, and maybe easily 12-point swing in there, as we see quite often. One team is wasting an opportunity and the other is scoring very quickly after as a result. And it was a bridge too far. Although, at halftime, as a diehard Dolphins fan, you guys know I am, I'm thinking, hey, 24-4 at Suncorp. I was there when it was 26-6. Sorry, Clarkey, but we've seen this one before. The Dolphins did win the second half by 12 points. So they did kind of appear to maybe climb back, but it was a different story. The Storm were not going to give up, relinquish that 20-point lead. And so while the Dolphins were gallant and fought back, it was ultimately the class of Melbourne. And again, I put my hands up. If I'm going to whinge and say, oh, look at me, I backed you guys are winning lean, I did lean to the Dolphins, and the line was 6.5. So another game where I'm thankful that I didn't quite pull the trigger, because it saved what would have been a bit of an agonising best bet loss here. Would have the Dolphins' head start obviously just goes down with that 8-point Storm win.
And on Ben Hunt, I got to touch on that. I have a mutual friend with Ben Hunt who told me absolutely he wants to return home to Queensland. So something must have changed there, because this is like a mutual friend that's like best friends with Ben Hunt. I was told by someone at the Titans, who I can't say who or what, but he said, we have a huge signing coming up. And then Buzz Rothfield in the Daily Telegraph the next day said, the Titans are looking to sign a marquee player, but they're not going to play him in his usual position. So I was, for like a solid month there, I genuinely thought we had Ben Hunt coming, but he must have changed his mind to stay there.
So when was this?
Oh, this was when his contract was up, and he had not re-signed that 2-year deal with the Dragons yet. Last year it was
okay, but as we said, he could revisit. I know he's under contract, but you mentioned all the guys coming off contract or who are available free agents, and none of them really feel like game-changing players. Oh, no. But the X factor will be someone breaking contract early or getting mutual terms for a release. And when you do change coach, and we know the relationship he had with Hook, he's got kind of the reasons on compassionate grounds, and maybe with the Dragons respecting everything he's done for that club, if he doesn't want to stay there any longer, don't know how he spent so long talking about Ben Hunt tonight, but there's hope, I think, for a few teams who are looking who's that kind of game-changing player out there. He could be the one.
And can I just say, if I was in charge of the Dragons and that did happen, reports suggest Jaden Sewer and Jack Bird, their back rowers, are unhappy. I'd be saying straight to the Raiders, hey, Corey Huddle-Wirranira is in reserve grade. We'll take him, thanks, and a transfer fee or maybe another player. So they could make it work for both teams there. I did see a comment I wanted to respond to. It was from Seth Prescott on Facebook. And I made this post. And I got slammed for it. People saying everyone does it. Worry about your Titans, all sorts of stuff. Guys, I watch every single game of footy, and I know that every team sort of does that. But Nelson's are noticeably worse, where he puts the ball on the ground and he just rolls it back. He does not play it. I said it once on Instagram, and he blocked me for it. So all I can think is either he thinks I'm a crap dude, or he's like, all right, this guy knows what's up and got rid of me. So yeah,
you and Nelson have got a connection as well.
We do. The same guy that did my forearm wrap does all of Nelson's Samoan tattoos as well. So yeah, please.
It's not personal. It's not personal. It's just technique. And although I think Nelson worst play the ball this weekend had to go to Caleb Ponga.
Didn't know what. And the worst part, he was spraying a teammate at the time. Great question there, Tyson. At this stage, the NRL physio says even if it's a moderate strain for Ryan Madison, 3 to 6 weeks, which will be a big loss for an Eels pack that's already without Regan Campbell-Gillard, mind you. We should get to it. I don't want to get to it, but we've got to. My boys go down 20-18. My MVP was Matt Burton, but I have to say, if you go the likes of Tavita Pangai Jr., I love it as well. He was excellent in the middle. Well, I don't love it, but I love it from a footy sense. And I love the battle of Tino versus TPG in the middle. TPJ, sorry. It was personal. And it sucks to say, but that's old school footy. Back in the day, you used to get the penalty. You'd take the hit up and you'd run straight at the guy you just had beef with. And you'd build these awesome forward battles in the middle. One of the famous ones I remember from being a kid when Marco Mealy knocked out Bryce Gibbs. Is it Bryce Gibbs?
Yeah.
He did something cheap in the ruck, and O'Mealy singled him out, ran straight at him next one, which Tino kind of did with Reed Marnie. That was another moment where Marnie, everyone's going, oh, will he be sin bin? And then one tackle later, he has to leave the field anyway. But look, unbelievable as a Titans fan. I'm laughing here because if I don't laugh, I could cry. We have now officially broken the NRL record. We have blown a double-digit lead the most times of any team in NRL history. What makes that so bad? We entered the NRL in 2007. We're the second.
I refuse to believe that. That can't be true.
At NRL era, so 1998 onwards, of course, not back to 1908.
It's still,
the modern era.
It's still hard to believe because you're into the comp, 9 seasons later than the majority. And you've got more double-digit
Titans fan winning. I remember them all. I remember them all. I was going to go back, but I won't do that to myself. But I've got jumping out at me right now. But the referee was all over the shop in this one. I won't criticize the ref. It happens too much. Just some inconsistencies and some wrong calls, I thought, that went both ways, probably favoring my side more, if I'm being absolutely honest. But here's the thing.
Do any jump out at you? Do you want to, like, there was one where the Bulldogs put Addo-Carr got the ball and put it on the boot, grubber into the in goal. Jaden Campbell cleaned it up, and it was going to be a dropout. And then the bunker overruled it and said 20-meter tap to the Titans. I thought that was a really stiff call against the Dogs, but I know the call that you're going to hate is first of all, the ref gets it totally wrong and gives a penalty against the Bulldogs for a pass off the ground by Max King, and his arm didn't hit the ground. But the part that you're going to be angry about is that there's a delay. Then it gets shown on the big screen. Everyone sees it wasn't a pass off the ground. Then the Bulldogs all yelled, challenge, challenge, challenge. It had to be 20 seconds plus after the call. And the ref allowed the challenge. The Titans got the Bulldogs got to replay the ball rather than it being a penalty to the Gold Coast. And the Bulldogs subsequently scored off a bomb that very set. So massive game changer. In fact, 2 of the Bulldogs' tries in this game in their comeback were just directly off bombs.
And I've been writing while you've been speaking. I had a knock-on from Carraz that was clearly off him, that they ended up getting the feed. Had the Tino incident on Reid Marnie. You could argue the forearm was lifted there. I had the Reid Marnie hip drop tackle, clearly not a hip drop. And if it is, why was he not sin binned if we're being consistent? I had the Bulldogs captain's challenge, which was clearly after 10 seconds. I had the Tanner Boyd passing the ball off the ground incident that the bunker somehow missed.
Which ended up being moot because it was a spilled put down. But that was ridiculous. It was the most obvious pass off the ground you've ever seen. And they wanted to give a try for that. And then penalised the Dogs for a pass off the ground later that wasn't. So it was all over the shop, all over the Aaron shop, because he's the one that had that stupid lifting tackle very late against his former team. If we fast forward all the way to the end, after the Bulldogs had come back from 14-0 down, and in fact, did the Bulldogs ever lead in the game before the final try? No, they didn't. So the Titans were up by 4 points, and Cruz Leeming spills the ball playing it with like under 4 minutes to go in Bulldogs territory. You're going to get an attacking kick, and you're going to make the Dogs have to go 80 or 90 meters. Sorry, I can see the pained look on your face. He spills it, so the Bulldogs get a feed 25 off their line, a bit less pressure, but still 3.5 minutes to go. And first or second tackle, Shop, stupid lifting tackle. Suddenly it's a penalty to the Dogs. The Titans still defend that whole set, and it's only on the 5th tackle that the Dogs come up with a kick again that is played at by the Titans that gets them a fresh set, which they do score the winning try from. So you do have to be sick, and I'm sorry. I think I messaged you and just said I'm sorry. And from a punting perspective, again, I thought the Bulldogs should have been favourites in this, so I said I liked the Dogs. I went to my best bet. Unfortunately, as you guys know, I took first half handicap. And some people questioned me today, should you have gone full game, knowing that the Titans are choke artists and that they consistently, fall away second halves? And I think it's a fair point. I mean, I was that close. I was either, am I going Dogs 1.5 full game or a half a point first half? I like the value of winning when you're not even in front at the first half, it's obviously level a lot more often than a game is level or even a 1 point margin at full time. Had my reasons anyway. That's just how it goes. But once that didn't win, I didn't want the Bulldogs to come back and win. So you and me both were a bit frustrated and sad to see the Titans blow another game here.
And lost for answers. I went through and looked at the stats to see if I could add anything interesting. We won almost every single statistic area besides one. Our kick diffuser was at 44%. The amount of times a Burton kick was allowed to bounce, the score could have been a lot worse for us. Look, Burton bombs do that to sides, but it's hard for me to criticize pro athletes, but the one stat that doesn't show up is heart and ticker and playing for 80 minutes for what's on your chest, being the Titan. Now, I won't question and say that they're not, but there just has to be something under the surface at the moment for the Titans. You win every stat area, you're up by 14 at halftime, and somehow you lose. And I wouldn't be frustrated if it was a one-off, but it's not an isolated issue. It's happened multiple times this year. Broncos, Dolphins, Bulldogs. I swear there's another one I don't even want to think. But yeah, if I knew what was going on, I'm sure the Titans would hire me because I'm not sure we know or they know what's going on. Really, really tough watch as a Titans fan.
Yeah, it's not a lack of heart in the sense of like they give up, but it's doubt. It's like ingrained in their DNA now, like a lack of confidence, a lack of killer instinct, and getting in front of these games. And I mean, part of that was meant to be signing Kieran Foran, was meant to bring the experience and kind of teach him how to win. But you can't rely on one player. But collectively, the group, I almost feel like they get the wobbles, like the yips, like they're in front and they are dreading what's going to happen. How are we going to blow this game? And they're making multiple mistakes. And as I say, it's mental mistakes when Leeming just drops the ball, playing the ball after he'd actually made a good 5th tackle run and he's just trying to get a quick play the ball for the kick. But that's a mistake, and the shot is a big mistake. And yeah, when a fifth tackle kick gets deflected and it's a set restart or whatever, like part of that's luck as well. But obviously, you've got to be more resilient and defend your line, knowing that the 2 points are on the line. Like the game is going to be won or lost based on whether you can keep them out of your try or out of your in goal, which the Titans, I'm sorry to say, couldn't, mate.
No, we couldn't. And I was optimistic after that Manly game where they did score in the second half that we turned a page, but clearly not. And I will just say that the Broncos game that we were killing them in, the Dolphins game, this game here, and I swear there's another one, we could literally be a top 4 team this year if we just didn't have these mental fade outs. And I say it again, the Titans are a talented team. We're not a good team yet, but we are talented. We can mix it with the best when we're on. We just can't do it.
And do you put any of that on the coach? Like, I feel like the coach has to wear a bit of that too.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough because, the coach clearly has a good game plan that is working. We're getting out to leads. We're playing good footy for most of the game, but is there a side of the coaching that's missing where we're not finishing the full 80 minutes? I honestly, I don't think the Titans have the answer. If they had, this is something you would address ASAP as a footy club. And it's just like you said, it's the nervous jitters. Oh, we're winning the game. We've got 3 minutes to go. Everyone keep cool, keep calm. Let's just get through this set. We'll have one set ourselves and we'll defend for 60 more seconds. We're done. Nope. Knock on. Penalty. Oh, let's let this kick bounce and let them score. It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Can we move on? Should we move on?
Yes, we can. We've gone way over time, but I know we couldn't go quick on that game because people want their money's worth. They wanted to hear the reaction. Unfortunately, people are sick like that. They want to hear, and I'm a bit the same. I like watching losing coach press conferences more than the winning coach ones because I feel like you learn more from them. So unfortunately, Clarkie people some people probably enjoyed that.
They love it. I saw a comment roll through before from Jet Wood saying, Titans cost me $3,000, you muppet. Contrary to belief of the fans online, Winnie, I have no influence on the result of how the Titans play. This one won't be easy for the Raiders fans, though. Their win streak is snapped. They go down to the Manly Seagulls, 42-14. My MVP was Tom Trbojevic, who had 3 tries, try assist, 9 tackle breaks, 200+ meters, back to his best. Now, I probably predicted this Raiders performance a week early, Winnie. Is it fair to say that? Because I said against the Eels, they got a nice win streak now. I think they'll be a bit complacent. They weren't in that game. Maybe you could say they were in this one. And maybe it's an element because the Raiders and the Rabbitohs both lost this round. Were they both potentially looking forward to that clash next week? I don't want to, put that out too much because it is like sort of without the origin players. But these are two sides that were expected to win. And they didn't win. They were heavy favorites. They could have been meeting next week with a combined 13-game win streak in round 13, which is unbelievable. But it's not to be. Manly are a side this year that every time I count them out, and you guys that watch this show know I've done it a fair few times, they rebound. And every week when I say they're trending down, I then have to stop and reevaluate because they are capable of this performance, but it all comes off the Trbojevic brothers. They will be potentially missing over this origin period for Manly, which ultimately I believe will make or break their season because they're already short on forwards with Woods, Kelma Tuolungi, and Josh Aloiai unavailable for relatively long-term 5+ week injuries.
Simply's out as well.
Oh, is he? So yeah, their depth is going to be tested so badly over this period. Ben Trbojevic today, hamstring, another back row forward out for them. Dare I say another margin that's impossible to pick. If you had Manly to win, I believe you. If you got Manly by 30 at Raiders home ground, I probably don't believe you. Really tough round to pick. But the biggest story from this one will remain Tom Trbojevic, who is back in form. And if he plays like that every week, Manly could make a run for the 8. Would you agree with that if he's in this sort of form?
We say that all the time. We say they can push the 4 if they were guaranteed a full healthy season of Turbo at his best, and they'd be pushing bottom 4 if they didn't get that. And the comments, some people saying keep your head up, Clarkie, and some people saying suck eggs, Clarkie. Sorry, that's how it is. Look, in this game, my best bet was Raiders -4.5, and I said the only way I could really see it losing would be Turbo winding back the clock, and that's kind of what happened. But Manly was so much better than they have been in the last month. I thought this game was quite similar to last week for Manly, where they had most of the ball and most of the territory. You got to remember they had the lion's share of possession and territory against the Sharks. They just couldn't do anything with it. This week, they just looked such a different team. So why is that? Well, Schuster was back, and Schuster actually did seem to add another dimension to Manly's attack. Turbo really looked way more rejuvenated. Jake Trbojevic was there, and you said, the Trbojevic brothers are difference. I mean, like when a team wins by 26 points, you're not going to put it down to one moment. But a key moment in this game, when the Raiders were losing by 8 at halftime and look like they've scored the first try of the second half through Elliott Whitehead, and he's dead set through the line and can choose to ground the ball, but for some reason wants to step back inside the fullback, Tom Trbojevic, just getting too cute, tries to step back inside Tom. Tom clings onto him and forces Elliott to change hands with the ball and twist. And in that time, who else but Jake Trbojevic, when every other player would have given up, is still fighting to get back and dislodges the ball an inch before it is grounded. Not only are the Raiders denied a 6-pointer there that would have cut the lead to 2, and I kind of felt at that point in the game like the Raiders were very capable and could easily gone on and won. The Manly Seagulls scored about 60 seconds later down the other end.
That's and then player.
Again, and yes, absolutely. And Jake will be there. It remains to be seen whether Tom has done enough today and might be as well. But Manly scored back-to-back tries straight after that. They didn't convert either of them, but you're going from +6 to Raiders to +8 points to the Manly. So I really feel like a brain-dead play by Elliott Whitehead. Like, you're not Addo Carr. Don't try and embarrass the fullback. You're through. Just put it down. 2 hands for beginners. That's a 14-point swing right there. So that's definitely not me excuse-making for why the Raiders didn't win. The Raiders just weren't at their best today. Pretty disappointing. As for why, I think it's not crazy to speculate they might have had one eye on the game ahead because it is a big one, big blockbuster clash, but there's no reason for that. You've got to respect every opponent in the NRL. As we say, 5 upsets in round 12. Anyone can beat anyone. And Manly was so much better. But, I mean, we've given you some of the reasons why. Key position players playing better today, doing what they're paid to do, some of these high-paid players for Manly, and also getting a high completion rate and playing the game at the Raiders end of the field for most of the match allowed them to build up quite a hefty scoreline. And I guess one positive to end it is that although Manly scored 42 and they were my opponent, I selected in the mixed matchup. That's the beauty of the mixed matchup. I don't have to be right on both legs because I was wrong to go against Manly that scored over 40. But luckily I was more right with West Tigers. We didn't have to worry. Their 66 points were never really threatened. And in fact, Top Sport already paid that out last night. So even if Manly scored 70 in this one, I would have chalked it up as a winner because if you backed it, you did win.
And can I say, imagine if Manly played first, you'd be very nervous thinking, the Tigers are scoring 42.
And that's how it goes sometimes. That's how it goes. Exactly. It is funny how I would imagine how many critical comments I would have gotten if this game happened first, how bad my tip would have been called. And very few of them ever come back. Like somehow none of those people have commented and said South's 13+. None of them seem to come back after Parramatta won by 20. So, hey, that's it. That's how it goes. We put ourselves out there and we know we'll get a little bit of flack from time to time. But we still love watching this competition and appreciate the opportunity that we get to get together a couple times a week and talk all about it, which we have done for our longest pod of the year right now. So probably just about time to sign off. TryPod merch is available for about 2 or 3 more days, guys. There's a link in the description if you want your last chance to get some. And now I know that round 13 is on the horizon, but of course it's all about Origin, which is why we opened this pod with Origin chat.
Yeah, that's it, guys. Stay tuned to the socials. We'll let you know when the Origin pod is locked in. We'll talk about it after this and get a graphic ready for that. And outside of that, we say thank you very much to everyone who was here throughout the show, including those on TikTok, which I'm pointing at right now because I did see a comment rolling through saying I was wondering who he was talking to. But yeah, Origin pod, stay tuned. Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. We'll be here to preview everything round 13 in the NRL season. So yeah, one last time, thank you very much for being here, guys. We appreciate you being with us every Sunday to recap the action. So cheers.